We are live. It is the conference championship round, probably, I would guess, the last show for us of the year. Bobby, I guess, how did the season treat you? We're pretty much done at this point. Did you enjoy the season? Did you feel you played well? How did it all go?
Yeah, it went well. It was nice to get a chance to go to the World Championships down in Miami for DraftKings. That was definitely pretty cool. It's definitely a good experience. Met a lot of good guys. So yeah, that was pretty much the highlight of my NFL season, I would say. Just getting in the grind with NBA right now. How did your season go?
Yeah, it went well. I pretty much just winning streaks of going above and below, beating the rake. And this last slate, although it didn't go super hot, the full slate, I kind of had a pretty darn good showdown slate. So and I think that was kind of a theme for me all year. I think showdown people still play pretty poorly. So I think if you're looking for edges still in DFS, niche sports, niche game types, even is probably still an edge just because the mainstream types of content don't really cover it. So excited to maybe work into more of that next season.
Yeah, I like Showdown. Definitely think it's definitely a newer game, so the edge is a little bit less thin than what it is if you're just running Classic. And yeah, I think that's a pretty good take. I like Showdown. I think it's definitely a good format.
Yeah, I mean, but at this point, I think it's fair to say we're on to the XFL. We got I don't know, like a month left.
Yeah, that's pretty
really
exciting, right?
I mean, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the the mainstream football fan is going to take of it, but I'm excited for just more football, different teams, different contests. And I think we had DK a few days ago announce, like, kind of quietly, that they'll have XFL DFS. So
yeah, they announced that, and they haven't told anyone what they're going to do with the Bachelor money, but it's good they were on top of that.
yeah, priorities.
Priorities.
Are you ready to get into the slate?
Yeah, we can jump right in. It's going to be pretty quick, right? Two gamer.
Yeah. I mean, not even if we cover every single player, it's not a ton, but I think that gives us at least an informational advantage on just being able to think about and process literally every player who will like put up numbers this week, like, at all. So with our first game, we have the Kansas City Chiefs at home. They're 7.5-point favorites to Tennessee, a 52.5 total, significantly higher than the other total of the slate, and that has come up 1.5. Like, this looks like the game of all games. My only problem is, like, I would imagine the ownership is going to be way higher on this one, and I still think there are paths to it hitting the under. Like, obviously, Vegas is pretty efficient. There are paths to it hitting the under, and I think more importantly, there are probably paths to it not being like the optimal game stack of the two. There's just so much variance that if ownership, like, where do you think ownership is going to fall? It has to be on this game, right?
Hopefully it falls in favor of this game, right? We would imagine, just because we're going to want a lot of pieces here. I would say love Mahomes. Kansas City is just like a great stack in general. We kind of don't really have to get into like how good they are as a play. Like Kelsey, like Tyreek. Maybe this is the Tyreek week relative to last week's Kelsey 4 touchdowns, 3 1/4 week. Which pretty much burned me, but yeah, that's kind of. And then we have to make a decision on Derrick Henry, right? Can he sustain it?
I'm making the same decision I've made every single week, and it's never failed me except for every week where it's failed me and I don't play him.
Yeah, I would just play him. I don't know how many lineups you're building. For me, like, I don't know, maybe I'd be more overweight on a guy like AJ Brown because Tannehill's kind of looking like he's popping a little. Not that I want to play much of him, but he just has a strong projection, it looks like. Yeah, maybe like be heavier on AJ Brown, but be with the field on Henry would kind of be like my thought process.
I like, my thoughts are just against like, as a 7.5-point underdog, and we saw last week, like this could flip at any moment. As a 7.5-point underdog, what are Derrick Henry's paths to success? They just have to, like, play very suboptimally if that Vegas line is correct. And I honestly, I'm 100% taking the Chiefs in this. Like, I would be betting on their side of the ball. So, like, as a massive underdog, that is the ultimate negative for Derrick Henry. Although, if he's going to be low owned like last week, I think he wasn't even like a mega chalk. In that case, I think it's totally fine to be with or above the field on him, because it takes, much like some of these like high price receivers, it takes like, I don't know, for him 3 or 4 plays to get these massive like multi-touchdown games. But I don't know. I still think like he'll probably be somewhat popular, even like, adjusting for everyone's popular on this slate. I would much rather kind of just go to the other game and hope that Vegas is wrong.
Yeah, I just think that he's so heavily involved. Like, it's definitely something that you need to consider, especially they just want to establish it right when he's playing. Like, they're just going to try to establish it. Like, we know what their game plan is. They have a great offensive line. This Chiefs front seven can get manhandled. So, yeah, I like the Chiefs. I just think we know what they've ridden Henry for this long. Like, I don't think that's going to change. So I get why taking the fade is definitely viable at this price and projected ownership. And it makes sense in tournaments. Like, that's why for me, I'd probably have more AJ Brown.
Yeah, I think if I'm going to lobby that hard against Derrick Henry, either I have to full on fade Tennessee, which I think, as like the way Kansas City scores is so fast and so rapid that like full on fading Tennessee just can't be optimal. Like, somebody is going to get there, even if it's just like a Corey Davis on a handful of extra targets, or like Jonnu Smith in the same way, where like either this team successfully runs the ball and keeps it close, or they lose by a lot and they throw a lot. Somebody is valuable either way. And so for me to say I don't like Derrick Henry as much, I think almost out of necessity, you have to like AJ Brown, which I do like. I like AJ Brown, especially coming off of 2 slow weeks. I mean, like I think he's got like 2 catches in the past 2 weeks or something like that. But it's pretty reasonably explained by the fact that they held their 2 opponents to 25 points and just established the mess out of it with Derrick Henry. Like, if that doesn't work, they have to turn to the passing game, in which case like AJ Brown, one of the most efficient receivers in the league this year, is like, that's exactly where I'd be going. So
like, they don't have another game plan, right? Like,
yeah, I would be almost curious to see what happens.
Like, that's like, well, they're not going to go in and just completely change what they're trying to do. So
no, I think the only way that happens is
like obviously the game could change and they'll have to be more pass heavy if they're down. But I also think like in that scenario, you're going to see more Derrick Henry than we have seen previously, right? So taking the complete fade is kind of a little something I'm not really something I wouldn't want to do.
Yeah, like last week I'm looking at it, and like I don't know exactly what contest this is, or this would be for, but he was owned like just shy of 20%. Like in a slate with what last week was 4 games, that's like very reasonable ownership. And I think if he comes into whatever the scaled version, like if it's 30 to 40% on a slate where you have 2 teams to choose from, it's like, yeah, it's very reasonable. I just think like at some point the people watching, especially as you get into these higher profile games, the people just watching the film and watching the game logs are just going to love Derrick Henry.
Yeah. The guy who I think would be kind of more – the guy who's definitely the better point per dollar play right now is Damian Williams. Just at 7K, and he's also sees pass game usage. He's like a really strong play. I would like to see like where his ownership kind of gravitates to.
Yeah, he's a guy who like last week was projected to be, and he might have ended up close to it as like the chalkiest player of the slate. And he was like, it was kind of like we talk about having these like these low price running backs. They're like, he wasn't as low price, but like the mega chalk running backs, they tend to hit, especially like for guys like him where they're 3 down backs. Like Darwin Thompson and LaShawn McCoy saw 2 snaps and 0 touches last week. I would much rather bet on him over Derrick Henry, and especially like we talk about, I'm not necessarily inclined to get both of my running backs in the same like from the same game in the same lineup. Although if you're playing 3 running backs, you do have to this week.
Yeah, you could and on the slate like this, you could play 2 running backs from the same offense. I don't think that's out of the just trying to differentiate. It's going to be pretty tough. So yeah, I don't mind that thought process. Overall, like, what are your plans with like a guy like say Sammy Watkins or a Hardman, guys that like Sammy Watkins had a relatively good game last week. If people are going to chase that, for me, like probably rather go in a different direction. I don't know kind of what your feelings are.
Yeah, so I think this is kind of a decision I've yet to make, but it's, do I just want to like match or overweight the field on Patrick Mahomes? Because like even as his highest price, he's still projected to be one of the best values, and like he could easily smash that. So like I think if you are going with a Patrick Mahomes, you can't just run like a Damian Williams, Tyreek Hill. You do have to run like Tyreek Hill, Damian, and McCole Hardman, and or DeMarcus, anybody. For me, I don't think the Sammy Watkins one game is really going to change his ownership that much. That's something we've seen. Like players have to crush many weeks in a row to actually garner ownership this season because the field is a bit sharper. So for me, I'm fine with going back to Watkins, and I would make it like mandatory to get one of him, Hardman, or like Robinson in any lineup with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, you have to kind of differentiate because Mahomes and obviously their offensive weapons are going to be so chalky. That's why I love the like AJ Brown, one of these like a Ferkser or a Jonnu Smith, just to kind of differentiate your build and then have those guys mixed in as well if you're game stacking.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought up Jonnu. I think Jonnu at 3,400. One, we're going to see so much shock on Kittle Kelsey. If you were to run like Tyreek, no Kelsey, running Jonnu Smith at tight end instead is going to give you not only like he's going to be a unique play, but it's going to give you a pretty unique build.
Yeah, Tajay Sharp and Raymond are like mentions just because this is a 2-game slate.
Mm-hmm.
Khalif Raymond had the like 50-yard touchdown pass catch versus Baltimore. And then Dion Lewis, if they're playing from behind, is another guy that could see some utilization. And he would be definitely contrarian with how many people are going to be rostering Derrick Henry.
Yeah, Dion Lewis, not like probably not end up like getting in any of my full slate builds, but 100% I would be considering him. I don't know what his price is in Showdown, but like I think a guy like him in Showdown makes a ton of sense.
Are we going to step on to the next game, or?
Yeah, sure. Next game we have.
Do you have anything else you want to talk about? Maybe a Blake Bell.
Oh man, Blake. These like cheap tight ends on Showdown have just crushed. Like we had, I mean, even in full because the slates are small, but like they're so cheap in Showdown. The cheap tight ends a few weeks ago was Ferkser when he had the touchdown. Blake Bell, like these like I think that's one of the biggest edges in Showdown is just finding guys who are like on the field enough to score a touchdown. And like when it hits, you lead yourself to the optimal lineup so quickly.
Yeah. No, that's the truth.
Yeah, so I guess we can hop into the next game. We have San Francisco versus Green Bay. San Francisco 7.5 point home favorites, a 45-point total. Not really much line movement in this one. Did move up from the key number of 7 to 7.5, but not nearly the radical movement on the total as we saw with the last game. I guess like the obvious question here is, what are you doing with the San Francisco backfield?
Yeah, right now, just as a pricing play, I'm going to Raheem Mostert. And it is a 2-game slate, right? Like it's gonna be hard to get different. But you gotta think like the public, they will maybe gravitate towards Tevin Coleman, and Raheem Mostert's just like priced so well. Unless we get like news that obviously that calf injury is gonna act up again, I don't mind going back to him. And I think we have the most like defined usage in this game as well between Kittle and Devontae Adams. I think they're really good plays. In just how they're going to be utilized within these games. Like both teams are going to rely on these guys so heavily that they're definitely going to be like just players you have to consider. And they're going to, by paying up for them, it's going to make builds with Henry a little difficult. So for that matter, like maybe I like getting those two guys in relative to a Henry lineup, which is going to be pretty difficult with Mahomes. You could just play Henry with the two of them and then fade the Chiefs, but I like really getting Kittle and Adams, mainly Kittle for that matter.
Yeah, I completely agree. Especially I think he's coming off of at least one, like obviously last week he didn't do almost anything. I think the week before, I don't even know if he did that well, but like he has just accounted for so much of his team's yardage and points throughout the season. Like I can't imagine at 5,800 how you couldn't be having a lot of Kittle. Like I think I would be taking him over Kelsey, especially with like I'm imagining last week the Kelsey smash is just going to inflate his ownership. So yeah, I love Kittle. Like I'm actually interested in. I guess there's one more thing. You said that the Tevin Coleman ownership could be up. I just really think there are 3 backs on this slate that are like very clearly the 3 good running back plays. And in tournaments, I'm fine with just gambling with any San Francisco running back. I think we're going to see so little ownership because the discrepancy between like the certainty of any of Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones, and Damian Williams is so much different than the uncertainty that we see with this San Francisco backfield. I think there's just going to like no ownership is relative, obviously, but on this slate, I think that creates such a gap in ownership that I do agree that it's Raheem Mostert. But like, I wouldn't fault anyone for playing any of these San Francisco running backs. It was for like 5 straight weeks. Raheem Mostert saw at least 10 carries, and Tevin Coleman saw no more than 5. Last week, Mostert pulled up with a I believe it's a calf injury. He already practiced in full. I think he'll be full go in terms of health. And if the past 5 weeks before last week were any indication, he's their lead back. So yeah, I think he's one of the stronger plays of the slate, both in projection, and I think he's one of the better projection like points per dollar plays, and his ownership is going to be relatively tampered because there are other certain running back plays, and he busted last week. So I think he's like one of my favorite running back plays of the slate.
Yeah, I'm going to be pretty ahead of the field in terms of my ownership to Mostert. Just makes like a good playoff. If people are going to chase Coleman, albeit Tevin Coleman will beat me again this week, but I think I can live with it and just take the price and the decreased ownership on Mostert. Not that it's going to be ridiculously decreased because it's a 2-game slate, but whatever edge I can find at this point, like I'll take it.
Yeah, so in this game, like I guess what is your interest level in game stacking this one? Because it is clearly in terms of just how many points are projected to be scored, less optimal game to stack. But like Jimmy G has had a decent ceiling this season, 3 games of 4 touchdowns. As a home favorite, the 49ers, typically their games hit the over by a decent amount, like over 4, I think it's 4.6 points 3 games hit the over by on average. Like I think there is a chance for a decent amount of scoring in this game. And I'm imagining we get most of the ownership funneling to the other games. So I think just in terms of game theory, when you get 2 offenses with ceilings, they're not as good, but they do have ceilings. I'm totally fine stacking this game, and I'd probably look to do it with Jimmy G.
Yeah, I think Jimmy G is a great play. I think Rodgers is a great. Honestly, like I say, I love Mahomes, and like Mahomes is probably gonna. If I can get to him in cash, he's obviously. But in tournaments, like everyone's just gonna play Mahomes, so you kind of have to go to guys like Adam, like Rodgers, like Jimmy G, like Tannehill for that matter, just to be different. And I think that we'll likely see one of like. Unless it's Mahomes with one of his differentiated wide receivers that wins tournaments, like we're gonna see one of those 3 win the tournaments. So,
yeah, there is no way somebody solo wins with a Mahomes
with a Chiefs
bill.
back, it's not possible. Like, Mahomes in cash, but going the other way in tournaments is definitely the better option. I don't mind Garoppolo, Manny Sanders, Kittle stacks. I know Debo's like can break a slate in any instance, but like Sanders in these tight games, and I don't mind using like Sanders and Kittle and then Rodgers and Adams as a game stack, like running it back with Rodgers and Adams.
Yeah, just to I think it is more likely that we see any one of the non-Mahomes quarterbacks in a very bland stack, just like Tannehill, AJ Brown, Joe, the 2 clear options. That is more likely to win a tournament than a stack of Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and like Demarcus Robinson, McCole Hardman, or something like that. Like those guys have less odds of hitting and winning a tournament than just your like vanilla Jimmy Garoppolo stack.
Yeah, I'm like of the same thought process. Like I think that your stacks are gonna have to be, unless you have Mahomes with one of his secondary receivers and you catch lightning in a bottle and they hit. Then for me, like the only other out in terms of winning tournaments this weekend is probably going to be rostering one of these other QBs. Now Mahomes in cash, obviously, but the other QBs in tournaments.
Yeah, and so for me, I think like Jimmy's probably my favorite stack. And I do agree that I think almost certainly it will be Kittle and one of the receivers, because Kittle is like 2nd in yardage and receiving touchdowns accounted for by a tight end. Like he is like not the entirety of the offense, but as far as tight ends go, he is the most entirety of his offense out of anybody. So for me, I would be like mandatory Jimmy G and George Kittle. If I'm playing either, or if I'm playing Jimmy G, I have to play Kittle. And then I would look to run that again with like, I like Debo more, but I really, both of them are solid plays. And Emmanuel Sanders is cheap, man. He is cheap as all mess. So like on DK, he's 4,900, Debo's 55. Like below 5K, the receiving options are trash, except for Emmanuel Sanders, who's a very strong play at 4,900.
Yeah, I love Manny, and I think he fits this game very well in terms of just being able to get off coverage and being someone that Garoppolo can rely on outside of Kittle.
Yeah, on the other side of the ball, I think it's like it's pretty clear. There are, for me, probably three options. I don't think I'm not willing to go to Jimmy Graham, especially I'd just rather play Jonnu Smith. Like I think if you're paying down at tight end, just go with Jonnu Smith for me. For me, it's Devontae Adams, great play. Aaron Jones, great play, especially last week. Tyler Ervin out-touched Jamal Williams. They both got a combined 3 carries and 1 target. Like they completely gave the entire backfield to Jones. And if you're if you're looking to play Aaron Jones, that's the time you want to get him, not when they're giving Jamal Williams double-digit touches.
Yeah, Jamal Williams, I was significantly overweight last week. Wish I could had an opportunity to kind of run that back. It's because I just thought I could get the leverage. Aaron Jones, he's a fine play, especially if he's going to see the usage that he's seeing. It's just you have the San Francisco 49ers defense, which has been great against running backs all season. But for the usage on a 2-game slate, I don't think you can go wrong. Where's his price at?
Aaron Jones on DK is 6,700. He's cheaper than Damian, and obviously is cheaper than Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
The only Devontae Adams, another, especially if I'm running Garoppolo stacks, Devontae Adams almost certainly will be in those. The only other player I'm really awfully interested in is Allen Lazard, who before last week where he got injured, I think he maybe came back at some point, but he missed most of the game. He had 17 targets in a span of 2 games, and he was playing over half the snaps in 6 or 7 straight. He was clearly the number 2. And then he had capped off the regular season with a lot of work. Last week he gets injured, but he's already logging a limited practice on Wednesday. I fully expect him to play. And if he's playing, they're going to put him on the field because that's what they've done the entire second half of the season. So I'm dipping my toes back into that well.
Yeah. So any Kyle Juszczyk for you? Got to get different on this slate.
Didn't he? I don't think he had a single touch last week.
I don't think he did either. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, another guy that can take a top off of defense. No work last week at all.
No work last week with Allen Lazard injured. Allen Lazard played a low in snaps by a long shot in the past second half of the season. Still nothing for Valdez-Scantling. Just
nothing.
Yeah. So, maybe Juszczyk on. I guess the only way I play Juszczyk, because Juszczyk played so many snaps last week. He gets on the field, but the only reason they ever have to use him is a 2-minute back, basically. If they're running hurry up. So I guess the only scenario I play him is if I believe the Packers get out to a lead, and probably still only on Showdown. But it's not the worst play because there have been points in the season where he gets targets, and I legitimately think he's good. It's just you need a very what?
Do you though?
Dude, he's sick. I like him.
No, he is good.
But there's just only a very specific scenario where he gets used. And I don't think, especially on the main slate, I don't think that scenario happens often enough to actually be worth playing him.
No, I'm with you. I don't think it happens either, for that matter. I think Scantling would be someone I'd maybe be interested in if he catches a long ball. It could be a slate breaker, just to be a little bit overweight. If he's at 3%, be at 6, something like that.
Yeah, I think that is that's everybody on the main slate. I guess any interest for you in Jimmy Graham?
I hate Jimmy Graham. I have no interest. He's so bad. Played a better game last week. I never seen a fall from grace like Jimmy Graham in any sport.
Yeah, Jimmy Graham didn't top 50 yards in the second half of the season. It doesn't look he just doesn't. He's not explosive anymore. They don't use him. He's not scoring touchdowns. He literally has 2 touchdowns in the year. He just what? I just can't imagine why you'd ever play him. He has no upside to me.
No, I'm with you. I have no interest in Jimmy Graham.
Okay, that's the entirety of the main slate, which is only 2 games. I guess this is also kind of useful for building lineups. What do you like? Who would you pick for both of these games? I'd take KC via the spread, and I'd probably be pretty middle on San Francisco Green Bay. Like I think 7.5 is good there.
And then I take Green Bay. I take the 2 dogs.
You take Tennessee. Interesting. So I think if you
welcome to cover the spread, yeah.
Yeah, if you think, especially if you think Tennessee keeps it within a 1-score game like throughout, Derrick Henry, that's like I don't think that's going to happen. That's why I'm not playing Derrick Henry. If you do think it's going to happen,
what money is, so I don't have it. Like really, I'm just going off the top of my head.
I would. I guess this is probably why I'm interested in like Jimmy G. I'd be very interested in the over 45 in the San Francisco game. So I'm like. Yeah, I think it's really hard to play Mahomes, and I have solid reasons to at least I'd be betting that San Francisco Green Bay hits the over. So that's the game I like to stack. I guess my final thoughts would be like maybe if you're doing that, you'd want to look to like a Damian Casey defense stack.
Yeah, that could make sense.
Also, I guess we don't really talk about this. Where's your defense going this week? For me, it's like I love playing KC against Ryan Tannehill. Takes the second highest rate of sacks in the league. Kansas City is top 10 in sacks on the season. It just makes too much sense to me.
Yeah, I don't mind Tennessee Green Bay in tournaments. It's because everyone's going to have Chiefs. So I don't mind getting some Titans exposure. They're pretty cheap at 2K. Like we can get a turnover. It's just a pricing play.
Mm-hmm.
Then Packers in the same instance, like we've seen Jimmy G be turnover prone. So I don't mind that.
All right. I mean, that's the main slate. Not a ton to talk about, but looks like we don't have any questions. Everybody, thank you for tuning in all season.
I wanted to say too, like I wanted to thank Emil for letting me come on. Started reading his magazines in like the 5th grade, so it's been really nice to have this opportunity to come on these last 2 years and do this. I don't know what I'm going to be doing moving forward, so just wanted to shout him out.
Awesome. Yeah. Had a blast this year. Emil, thanks for putting us on. Bobby, thanks for coming on. I'd like to think, we learned a lot, at least as a DFS player. I learned a lot this season. So everybody, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to us and putting up with us. We will catch you. I don't know. We'll catch you at some point. You can always find us on Twitter, myself at Kyle Tweets here, and Bobby Gomes at Bobby Gomes DFS.
Later, guys.